When Michael Turner retired after 28 years as a police detective, he promised himself one thing. His life would finally become ordinary. For nearly 3 decades, he had spent his days investigating crimes, interviewing witnesses, and making difficult decisions that affected people's lives. Every shift demanded alertness. Every case carried responsibility. Every mistake could cost someone their safety. Retirement, he believed, would be different. He imagined quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons restoring old woodworking projects in his garage, and evenings spent walking his golden retriever through peaceful neighborhood streets. After months of searching, Michael found exactly what seemed to be the perfect place. The neighborhood looked like something from a postcard. Wide streets curved beneath rows of mature maple trees. Children rode bicycles without worry. Neighbors waved as they watered colorful flower beds. The community clubhouse overlooked a sparkling lake where families gathered every weekend. Everything appeared peaceful. Like many desirable communities, however, the neighborhood was governed by a homeowners association. Michael wasn't thrilled about that detail, but he understood why many neighborhoods had won. Rules helped maintain shared spaces. Common standards protected property values. Responsible management could benefit everyone. As long as people treated one another fairly, he saw no problem. During his first month, everything exceeded expectations. The landscaping remained immaculate. The walking trails stayed clean. Packages arrived safely. Residents smiled and introduced themselves. One person, however, stood out immediately. The neighborhood security guard. His name was Victor Lawson. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always wearing a perfectly pressed security uniform, Victor patrolled the community in a white HOA vehicle nearly every hour of the day. At first glance, he looked professional. He greeted residents confidently. He stopped occasionally to answer visitors' questions. He waved children safely across intersections. Most newcomers assumed he took his responsibilities seriously. Michael appreciated that. A visible security presence often discouraged crime. Yet something about Victor slowly began attracting Michael's attention. It wasn't one specific incident. It was a collection of small moments. Victor often parked beside certain homes for unusually long periods. He questioned delivery drivers while allowing others through without hesitation. He stopped younger residents far more frequently than retirees. He occasionally asked visitors where they were going, even after they had already checked in at the front gate. Nothing individually appeared alarming. Together, however, the pattern felt oddly selective. Years spent investigating people had sharpened Michael's instincts. He rarely ignored unusual behavior. Still, he reminded himself that retirement meant letting others do their jobs. Perhaps Victor simply took neighborhood security seriously. The first direct encounter came on a warm Saturday morning. Michael had just finished unloading lumber from his pickup truck for a woodworking project. The materials rested neatly inside his own driveway. Before he could close the truck bed, Victor's patrol vehicle stopped abruptly beside him. The security guard stepped out carrying a clipboard. Without greeting Michael, he began examining the lumber stacked near the garage. Several moments passed before he informed Michael that construction materials could not remain visible without prior HOA approval. Michael politely explained that he had purchased the wood less than 15 minutes earlier. It would be stored inside the garage immediately. Victor, nevertheless, recorded something on his clipboard before driving away. The interaction lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet it left Michael strangely unsettled. Not because of the reminder. Because of the attitude. Years in law enforcement had taught him an important lesson. Professional authority depended upon respect, not intimidation. The following Monday, Michael received an official HOA warning. The notice cited improper storage of construction materials. No fine accompanied the warning. Only documentation. Michael quietly filed the letter away. He assumed the misunderstanding would never happen again. He was wrong. 2 weeks later, Victor stopped Michael while he walked his golden retriever around the neighborhood lake. The guard requested proof that the dog had been registered with the HOA. Michael calmly produced the registration tag attached to the leash. Victor examined it carefully, then requested vaccination records. Michael politely explained those documents remained inside his home. Victor wrote another note on his clipboard. Again, no explanation, no violation, simply another entry. As Victor walked away, Michael noticed several other residents passing nearby with dogs. None were stopped. None were questioned. None appeared even noticed. That evening, Michael observed Victor's patrol vehicle from his front porch. The guard slowly circled the neighborhood. He paused beside one particular house, then another. Later, he stopped near Michael's driveway. He remained parked for nearly 5 minutes before driving away. Michael looked at his watch. Nothing unusual occupied the street. The neighborhood remained peaceful. What exactly had required such close observation? The answer arrived sooner than expected. Another HOA notice appeared 3 days later. This time, the warning referenced an unauthorized garage door remaining open. According to the report, the garage had stayed open for 27 minutes. Michael stared at the letter. The woodworking project had indeed required the garage door to remain open while he organized equipment. Nothing blocked sidewalks. Nothing endangered neighbors. More importantly, Michael remembered seeing Victor's patrol vehicle parked across the street that same afternoon. The timing matched almost perfectly. Michael began reviewing the neighborhood handbook. Garage doors were encouraged to remain closed when practical. The guideline contained no mandatory time limit. Yet someone had converted a suggestion into an official warning. The detail interested him, not because of the warning itself, because someone appeared to be documenting his routine with surprising precision. Over the following weeks, similar incidents quietly accumulated. Victor questioned a landscaping crew working at Michael's home despite proper authorization. He inspected Michael's visitor parking permit twice in 1 week. He photographed a delivery van parked briefly in the driveway. Each encounter remained polite. Each seemed unnecessary. Neighbors gradually noticed. One afternoon, an elderly resident named Alina approached while Michael worked in his front garden. She glanced toward the street before speaking. Her expression suggested hesitation. She admitted Michael wasn't the first homeowner to receive unusual attention from Victor. Several residents had experienced repeated questioning. Others complained about excessive patrols near their homes. Some received warnings after disagreements with HOA management. Most simply stayed quiet. Nobody wanted problems. Another homeowner, Carlos, later shared a similar experience. His visiting daughter had been stopped 3 separate times while driving through the neighborhood despite properly registering at the entrance gate. Eventually, she stopped visiting altogether because every trip felt uncomfortable. A young couple described being followed through the community after hosting family members for a birthday gathering. Retirees mentioned Victor routinely photographing homes during evening patrols. No single incident sounded outrageous. Together, they painted a picture that felt increasingly familiar. Selective attention, repeated documentation, unnecessary authority. Michael listened far more than he spoke. Old investigative habits quietly returned. He wasn't interested in rumors. He wanted facts. One evening, while walking near the clubhouse, Michael noticed Victor confronting a teenage boy delivering pizzas. The young driver stood beside his vehicle, while Victor carefully inspected delivery paperwork. Meanwhile, 3 other delivery drivers entered the neighborhood without interruption. Again, the inconsistency caught Michael's attention. Professional enforcement required consistency. Without it, authority gradually became personal. The following morning, Michael purchased a simple notebook. Every encounter, every warning, every patrol observation, every unusual interaction. He recorded dates, times, locations, and witnesses. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Retirement had not erased nearly 3 decades of investigative discipline. It had merely given him more time to observe. Weeks passed. His notebook slowly filled. Patterns emerged. Victor's patrol vehicle appeared near certain homes repeatedly. Specific residents received disproportionate attention. Others seemed almost invisible. Then something happened that transformed Michael's quiet curiosity into genuine concern. Late one afternoon, his next-door neighbor, Sarah, returned home visibly upset. Her teenage son had been walking back from basketball practice when Victor stopped him near the clubhouse. According to Sarah, the security guard questioned the teenager extensively about where he lived, why he was in the neighborhood, and whether he belonged there. The boy had lived in the community his entire life. Neighbors witnessed the encounter. Several quietly admitted it seemed unnecessarily aggressive. Sarah wasn't angry simply because her son had been questioned. She worried about how embarrassed and frightened he felt afterward. Michael watched as the teenager avoided eye contact while walking inside. The scene reminded him of something he had witnessed countless times during his police career. Authority used without judgment often damaged trust far more quickly than it built safety. That evening, Michael opened his notebook once more. He added Sarah's account. Then he compared every previous entry. A pattern that once seemed vague now appeared unmistakably consistent. Certain homeowners, certain families, certain visitors. Repeatedly. The neighborhood security guard wasn't simply patrolling. He appeared to be choosing who deserved scrutiny. Across the street, Victor's patrol vehicle slowed once again before stopping near Michael's house. The guard remained inside for several minutes, looking toward Michael's driveway before continuing down the road. Michael calmly closed the notebook. For the first time since retiring, he recognized a familiar feeling returning. The feeling that a simple complaint often concealed a much larger story. He had no intention of creating conflict. But if someone entrusted with protecting the neighborhood had begun misusing that responsibility, then the truth deserved to be uncovered. And this time, Michael had both the patience of retirement and the experience of a detective. Together, they made a powerful combination. Michael Turner had spent nearly 3 decades building criminal cases. One lesson from those years had never left him. People often remembered dramatic incidents. Investigations were usually solved by ordinary details. A receipt, a date, a photograph, a repeated pattern. That was exactly how Michael approached the growing concerns surrounding the neighborhood security guard. He wasn't trying to prove Victor Lawson was a bad person. He wanted to determine whether the complaints reflected isolated misunderstandings or something much larger. Every morning began the same way. Coffee, a quiet walk with his golden retriever, a glance through the notebook resting beside the kitchen window. Each page contained simple facts. Dates, times, locations, vehicle numbers, witnesses. Nothing emotional, nothing speculative, only observations. Within a month, the notebook had become surprisingly thick. One entry described Victor stopping a delivery driver for identification, while another driver entered the same neighborhood minutes later without being questioned. Another documented repeated patrols outside the same group of homes. Several entries showed that certain residents received multiple warnings, while neighboring properties with similar situations attracted no attention at all. Individually, each incident appeared minor. Together, they suggested something more concerning: selective enforcement. Michael knew patterns became stronger when supported by independent observations. Instead of asking leading questions, he simply listened whenever neighbors chose to speak. Word quietly spread that the retired detective carefully documented facts rather than neighborhood gossip. People who had remained silent for years slowly began knocking on his front door. The first visitor was Sarah. She carried copies of every HOA notice her family had received during the previous 18 months. Most involved situations first reported by neighborhood security: parking, guest registration, noise complaints. Many included Victor's name as the reporting officer. Michael compared the dates with his notebook. Several matched patrol observations he had already recorded. The next evening, Carlos arrived. He brought security gate visitor logs showing his daughter had properly registered each visit. Despite that, Victor had repeatedly stopped her vehicle after she entered the community. The pattern appeared unusually consistent. Visitors connected to certain homes experienced additional scrutiny. Others drove freely. Soon, more residents contributed documents: retired teachers, young families, military veterans, single parents, business owners. The stories differed. The paperwork looked remarkably similar: repeated documentation, frequent warnings, minor issues becoming official reports. One Saturday afternoon, Michael decided to observe neighborhood activity from the community park. He carried no camera, only a newspaper and a notebook. For nearly 3 hours, he quietly watched normal traffic. Children played basketball. Parents pushed strollers. Residents walked dogs. Visitors entered through the front gate. Victor's patrol vehicle circled continuously. Michael noticed something interesting. Victor rarely stopped luxury vehicles owned by longtime residents. He seldom questioned board members. Yet contractors, delivery drivers, younger homeowners, and unfamiliar visitors received noticeably more attention. The inconsistency stood out immediately. Professional security depended on equal treatment, not personal judgment. Late that afternoon, something unexpected happened. A landscaping crew entered the neighborhood to replace shrubs at the home of an elderly widow. Their truck displayed proper company markings. The workers checked in at the gate. Nevertheless, Victor followed them for nearly 20 minutes. He inspected permits twice, photographed equipment, recorded license plate numbers. Meanwhile, another contractor completed work nearby without interruption. Michael wrote everything down. The following week brought another surprise. Elena invited Michael for coffee. Inside her dining room sat several old storage boxes. She explained that her late husband had served on the HOA board years earlier. After his passing, she had never bothered sorting through his files. Among old newsletters and meeting agendas rested something unexpected: security committee reports. Michael carefully reviewed them. The earliest reports described neighborhood patrols focused on community safety, checking parks after dark, watching clubhouse facilities, assisting emergency responders, helping stranded residents. Over time, however, the reports gradually changed. New language appeared: property compliance observations, architectural reporting assistance, resident documentation, rule enforcement support. The neighborhood security program had quietly expanded far beyond its original purpose. Michael found no records showing homeowners had discussed or approved those additional responsibilities. He photocopied the documents and thanked Elena. That evening, another homeowner reached out. Marcus, a technology consultant, had become curious about patrol schedules. Using publicly available mapping software, he began marking Victor's observed patrol routes over several weeks. The completed map surprised everyone. Certain streets received routine patrols. Others attracted extraordinary attention. Michael's street ranked among the most frequently monitored. So did Sarah's, Carlos's, several other homeowners who had previously questioned HOA decisions. Coincidence remained possible, but the pattern continued growing stronger. Then came the incident no one could easily dismiss. One Friday evening, the community clubhouse hosted a neighborhood charity dinner. Nearly every resident attended. Volunteers decorated tables, while families enjoyed food and music. Everything proceeded peacefully until a young nurse named Amanda received an urgent phone call. The hospital where she worked needed additional staff, immediately following a multi-vehicle highway accident. Amanda quietly left the event and hurried toward her car. Several minutes later, residents noticed Victor had stopped her vehicle near the neighborhood entrance. Although Amanda's resident decal remained visible, Victor spent several minutes checking identification and asking questions before allowing her to leave. The delay lasted only a short time, but many neighbors watched it happen. Several knew Amanda personally. They also knew she had been responding to an emergency. The unnecessary delay deeply unsettled them. Michael recorded witness names, times, locations. Again, facts. No assumptions. The following Monday, Amanda received an HOA notice claiming she had exceeded the neighborhood's speed limit while leaving. The timestamp matched the emergency call. She quietly accepted responsibility for driving faster than usual. But many residents questioned why Victor had delayed someone obviously trying to reach work during an emergency. The discussion spread quickly. Not through anger, through concern. For the first time, neighbors openly compared experiences. People who once believed they were alone realized many others shared similar stories. Michael continued organizing every document: visitor logs, warning letters, patrol observations, committee reports, maps, witness statements. Everything fit neatly inside labeled binders. He wasn't preparing accusations. He was preparing questions. Questions supported by evidence. Then Susan arrived. She had recently resigned as assistant secretary to the HOA board. Unlike many others, she carried internal administrative records, meeting agendas, security contracts, board memorandums. Among them rested one document that immediately caught Michael's attention. It described the neighborhood security officer's official duties. The list included traffic assistance, emergency response coordination, property protection, visitor management, and reporting criminal activity. Nothing authorized independent HOA rule enforcement. Nothing instructed security personnel to conduct routine compliance investigations. Nothing assigned them responsibility for documenting landscaping, garage doors, visitor frequency, or homeowner behavior. Michael quietly compared the job description with dozens of violation reports. The difference was unmistakable. Somewhere over the years, Victor's role had expanded beyond the responsibilities originally assigned. Whether someone directed those changes or Victor acted independently remained unclear. Either possibility deserved careful examination. As autumn approached, the HOA announced its quarterly board meeting. Ordinarily, attendance remained low. This time, nearly every homeowner planned to attend. Not because they wanted confrontation, because they wanted clarity. Michael spent the evening before the meeting reviewing every binder one final time. Each document had been indexed, every statement supported by dates, every observation verified whenever possible. Across the cover of the largest binder, He placed a simple printed label. Neighborhood security documentation. He closed the binder gently. Outside, Victor's patrol vehicle slowly passed Michael's home once again. The security guard glanced toward the front porch before continuing down the quiet street. Neither man realized that by the following evening, the discussion would no longer center on one homeowner. It would center on whether the neighborhood security program had quietly crossed the line between protecting residents and policing them without accountability. The quarterly HOA meeting began much like every meeting before it. Board members arranged their paperwork neatly across the long conference table. Committee chairs prepared routine reports. Residents filled the folding chairs inside the clubhouse, though attendance was far greater than anyone remembered. Normally, only a dozen homeowners attended. This evening, nearly every seat was occupied. Late arrivals stood quietly against the walls. Others watched through the open doors from the hallway. There was no shouting, no angry demonstrations, only an unusual sense of expectation. For the first time in years, neighbors who had quietly endured uncomfortable encounters were gathered in one place. The meeting followed its usual agenda: financial updates, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, holiday decorating guidelines. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Then the public comment period began. Michael Turner stood. His years as a detective had taught him that facts carried more weight than emotion. Instead of beginning with complaints, he walked calmly to the front of the room carrying 4 thick binders. He placed them gently on the board's table. Each binder carried a simple title: Security Patrol Records, HOA Warning Notices, Witness Statements, Security Policy Documents. The room fell silent. Michael explained how his interest had started with a simple warning about lumber resting in his own driveway for only a few minutes. He admitted that, at first, he believed the incident was probably a misunderstanding. Instead of arguing, he simply began documenting what he observed. Dates, times, locations. Nothing more. He turned to the first binder. Inside were patrol logs he had created over several months. Maps illustrated repeated patrol routes. Some streets received ordinary coverage. Others, including his own, experienced unusually frequent stops. The pattern became impossible to ignore when compared with reports from other residents. Sarah stepped forward next. She described how her teenage son had been questioned while walking home from basketball practice in the neighborhood where he had lived his entire life. She presented copies of repeated warnings her family had received after that incident. Carlos followed. He produced visitor registration logs, proving his daughter had properly checked in at the front gate every time she visited. Despite that, she had repeatedly been stopped and questioned inside the neighborhood. Amanda quietly shared her experience of being delayed while responding to an emergency call from the hospital. She accepted responsibility for driving faster than usual. What troubled her was the unnecessary delay during a medical emergency when her resident identification was already clearly displayed. One after another, homeowners calmly presented documents instead of accusations. The stories differed. The paperwork looked remarkably similar. Repeated inspections, repeated questioning, repeated warnings, often involving the same security officer. Then Michael opened the second binder. Inside rested the official job description for the neighborhood security guard. The document had been provided by Susan, the former assistant HOA secretary. Every board member received a copy. The responsibilities were clearly listed: monitor entrances, assist emergency services, protect common property, manage visitor access, report criminal or suspicious activity. Nothing authorized routine enforcement of HOA architectural rules. Nothing instructed the security officer to monitor garage doors, landscaping, visitor frequency, or personal routines. Several current board members quietly reread the document. Some exchanged uncertain glances. Many had joined the board years after the security program began. This was the first time they had compared official responsibilities with actual practice. Michael continued. He displayed photographs documenting security patrols parked outside the same handful of homes repeatedly over several months. He presented maps prepared by Marcus, showing unusually concentrated patrol patterns. He compared warning notices with corresponding patrol observations. The evidence revealed a consistent picture. Security responsibilities had gradually expanded into HOA compliance enforcement without clear homeowner approval. The issue was no longer whether Victor had written too many reports. The question had become much larger. Who authorized the chain? The HOA president requested a short recess. Board members gathered privately around the documents. Conversations remained quiet. Some looked surprised. Others appeared deeply concerned. When the meeting resumed, the tone had changed completely. Rather than defending previous practices, several board members acknowledged that the evidence raised serious governance questions. One director proposed an immediate independent review of the neighborhood security program. Another recommended suspending all pending HOA violations, initiated solely through security patrol observations, until that review concluded. The motions passed unanimously. Victor Lawson remained, seated near the back of the room throughout the discussion. For the first time since anyone could remember, the confident security guard appeared uncertain. Weeks later, the independent review began. Former law enforcement professionals, HOA governance consultants, and a licensed private security expert examined contracts, patrol records, violation reports, and board procedures. Their findings were comprehensive. The investigation concluded that neighborhood security itself had served a legitimate purpose. Crime within the community had remained extremely low. Residents generally appreciated visible patrols. However, the review also determined that the security role had gradually expanded far beyond its original mission. Over several years, the Guard had routinely documented HOA compliance issues despite lacking clearly defined authority to conduct those inspections. The consultants found no evidence that homeowners had formally approved such expanded responsibilities. More concerning, documentation standards varied significantly. Some homeowners experienced repeated patrol contacts. Others with similar situations received none. The report concluded that inconsistency, not simply enforcement, had damaged community trust. The recommendations arrived quickly. Effective immediately, security officers would focus exclusively on community safety, emergency assistance, visitor management, and protection of common property. Any HOA rule inspections would be conducted only by designated compliance personnel, following written procedures. Every interaction between security staff and residents would require documented justification. Body cameras would be introduced during official contacts to protect both residents and officers. Patrol vehicles would use GPS tracking to verify assigned routes. Residents would gain access to a formal complaint review process independent of the security department. Most importantly, all security staff would receive updated training emphasizing professionalism, de-escalation, equal treatment, and respect for homeowner rights. The HOA board accepted every recommendation. Victor Lawson resigned before the new policies took effect. No public celebration followed. Most residents felt something far more important than satisfaction: relief. A new security company was hired several weeks later. Their officers introduced themselves personally to homeowners. Instead of immediately looking for violations, They focused on helping residents. They assisted stranded drivers, escorted elderly homeowners during nighttime walks, directed emergency vehicles, helped lost visitors. Exactly the responsibilities originally intended. Gradually, the atmosphere throughout the neighborhood transformed. Children waved to patrol vehicles instead of avoiding them. Delivery drivers entered confidently. Visitors felt welcomed rather than scrutinized. Residents no longer wondered whether someone was documenting every minor activity outside their homes. Michael returned to the quiet retirement he had always wanted. His woodworking projects once again filled the garage. His golden retriever enjoyed peaceful walks around the lake. The notebook that had grown so thick during the investigation rested inside a filing cabinet. He hoped never to add another page. Months later, during the annual community picnic, several neighbors thanked Michael for his patience. He always responded the same way. The neighborhood had solved the problem together. Everyone who preserved documents, shared experiences, and remained respectful had contributed equally. No single person restored trust. The community did. As the evening sun settled behind the lake, children played safely across the park while neighbors gathered around picnic tables laughing together. The new security officer waved warmly as he completed his routine patrol. No one felt intimidated. No one felt watched. Everyone simply felt protected. Michael smiled quietly. His years as a detective had ended long ago. Yet one lesson remained true no matter where life took him. Real authority never comes from a uniform, a title, or a badge. It comes from accountability. When power is exercised with fairness, communities become stronger. When it operates without oversight, even good intentions can slowly lose their purpose. The neighborhood had learned that lesson together. Security existed to serve the people, not to control them. And once that balance was restored, trust returned to the streets where it had quietly disappeared. In the end, Michael realized he had found the peaceful retirement he wanted after all. Not because conflict never arrived, but because ordinary people chose truth, fairness, and respect over fear. That choice protected the neighborhood far better than any patrol vehicle ever could.